Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're dialing in from. Welcome to the Clearline Group's webinar, QlikView Lessons Learned, number 1 through 3, Deploying and Managing Multiple Applications. This is part of our 10 Things I Wish I Knew When I Started series. And once again, these webinar series are hosted by the Clearline Group. Before we get started, I'd like to cover some housekeeping here. We have 45 minutes blocked out for this webinar, so we should have plenty of time for question and answer at the end. During this webinar, everybody is on mute, but we welcome questions. You can ask via the questions box on your GoToWebinar screen. At the end of the presentation, we'll do our best to answer all the questions. And we are recording this webinar for future playback on our website, www.clearlinegroup.com. So you can review or forward to your colleagues. With that, we'd like to get started here and review the agenda. I'll do some introductions here in a second, and then after that, we're going to provide a real brief overview of QlikView because I'm assuming most of the people on the phone here or on the webinar here are pretty familiar with it. And then we're going to review the 10 Things I Wish I Know When I Started, which was a webinar series we started a little while back. And then specifically for this webinar, we're going to drive down into the lessons learned number 1 through 3, which are the first 3 on our list of 10 things. And those gear around, we kind of grouped them 1 through 3 because those gear around deploying and managing multiple applications, which seems to be a really hot topic right now within the QlikView environment. And then we're going to end up with, now that you know these 10 things, and more specifically 1 through 3, what's next, followed by the question and answer. So let's go through some introductions here. My name is John Schmidt. I'm the Vice President of Business Development for Clearline's BI practice. I'm an old-timer here. I've been doing technology from both the business development side, and I also started off my career as in a pre-sales role. I previously worked for ClickTech, Siebel, Hyperion, and NCR Teradata, so I bring a pretty broad background of business intelligence and also application side of the house from a technology perspective. The key presenter here today, though, is Rob Wozniak, who's an architect here at Clearline's Business Intelligence practice. He's an old-timer, too, not as old as me, but he's had 14 years of BI experience and data warehousing side. And what Rob really brings to the table, and this will kind of come out in the overall presentation, is not only does he have QlikView experience, but he's really an expert on data movement and data architecture, which you'll see when we start talking about deploying multiple applications is a real key that you need to have within your QlikView toolbox here. Rob's worked in a lot of different industries, from pharmaceuticals all the way through manufacturing. So we're competing here on who's got more gray hair, but hopefully our experience and our background and some of the things that we share today will be helpful. A little bit of background on Clearline Group. We're a boutique consulting firm headquartered outside of Chicago. What we do is we do business intelligence and enterprise performance management. And the key with our organization here is we've been doing this together as a team on and off for 12 years. And just like with Rob, most of our consultants here have a background on both the business side and the technology side. So we're just not, coding stuff. We're actually tying it back to business issues. Our breadth of skills go all the way from advisory all the way to implementation, architecture, and support. And I think one of the key differentiators here with Clearline is we're all full-time employees here. Our mantra is pretty straightforward. If our clients are successful, we're successful. So we all have a vested interest in driving that success, and that's kind of what's led to our rapid growth here as a firm. So changing gears a little bit, we'll provide just a real brief overview of QlikView, and Rob and I kind of went back and forth on this slide here as a chicken and egg, who created it first, because we call it the I heart or I love QlikView slide, who came up with it first. But since Rob's going to present the slide, I'll let him take the credit. So let me introduce you. Yeah. So let me introduce you to Rob Wozniak here.
Thanks, John. I think the slide says it all. It's like I heart QlikView. What's not to like about QlikView? It's really fast and easy to deploy. It's got great, robust graphics, in-memory database, so that means your queries come back near instantaneously. What I love about it is that, I was a long-time data warehousing and ETL guy, And, ClickView kind of combines, it's both a database and a presentation layer in one application. So it really was a good segue for me to get more involved in presentation on the front end. But the key is, of course, the associative data model, so that, whenever you make a selection or a click in ClickView, you see everything that's associated with that selection and also what's not associated with it. So what's impressive or not surprising about it, since I've kind of started with ClickView, is how quickly it's grown. And we're seeing today things like ClickTech is included in the Magic Quadrant, the Gartner Magic Quadrant of BI vendors. Also, they've started this whole new sort of field or genre called data discovery. So yeah, it's the real deal.
Yeah, so I love it as well, and you'll hear the enthusiasm in our voices as we continue on with the presentation. So once again, we said that this webinar is kind of a follow-on to the 10 things I wish I knew when I started series we put together, and it's like anything in life, going back, you'd like to maybe repeat high school or repeat, certain things. If you kind of begin with the end in mind and been there before, you'd hope you'd make better decisions. I'm not saying I made bad decisions. You could make better decisions going forward. So that was the whole crux of the 10 things, and it kind of came about because, you and I and the rest of the ClickView practice here at Clearline Group, have been around the block a few times. We've seen other technologies, and history kind of repeats itself. And a lot of these major ClickView deployments that are going out there, these 10, 20, 30,000 seat implementations, kind of have a common theme around them, just like with other technologies. So what we try to do was encapsulate these into a list of 10 things, no particular order, just kind of 10 things that we've seen. And as we continue to use this as our methodology going forward here, we get more and more feedback. So the list is evolving as we go on. So it's kind of a review of the 10 things here. We're going to concentrate on the first 3 of the 10 things here today, which really group into how do I manage the deployment of multiple applications from a data architecture perspective and an enterprise architecture perspective. The remaining 7, here they are. I'm not going to go through them all. They're well documented. We did a webinar before that it's available on our YouTube, Clearline Group YouTube channel. But the feedback we got after doing the top 10, we only had a similar type format. We had 45 minutes to do. Was everybody kept saying, "Hey, we loved it, but we want more." So hence that's today's webinar. And what we've been doing here at Clearline Group, and our clients have been very successful in using this, is when I'm looking at deploying an enterprise version of ClickView, starting off maybe with a couple dashboards and then eventually rolling it out to multiple departments and multiple users, I need some kind of framework to kind of measure, how is my architecture, how is my user adoption, what is my training. And we've actually built a health check here at Clearline Group where we kind of use the 10 things and measure the gaps between where you're at and what the best practices are, and we help our clients assemble a plan of attack. So you can go take these 10 things and do it on yourself, do it on your own. But the goal here is to kind of create a repeatable and reusable process, or a center of excellence type of knowledge from a ClickView, ClickTech perspective, so you're not reinventing the wheel as you continue to roll out these multiple applications. And it all gets down to, a lot of the individuals on the phone here and a lot of our clients have made an investment in ClickView, and what better way than to maximize your investment in ClickView. So enough review. Now we're going to dig down deeper into lessons learned number 1 through 3, which is how to basically manage multiple applications in a ClickView environment. So I'm going to transition this over to Rob here in a second. Issue number 1, or number 1 we saw on our list of top 10s, once again, no particular order, was, we hear a lot, data discovery does not mean you don't have to have a business problem. Can you expand upon that a little bit, Rob?
Yeah, so I think, the idea is really this notion of, nobody needs technology for technology's sake. So, technology is really only as good as, the problems it solves, or the level of analysis or the empowerment it creates. So when you look around, I mean, there's all these kinds of intractable problems. You see, data analysis problems that are ripe for a solution like ClickView. So, for instance, in pharmaceuticals, at least when I've seen what I've encountered is that pharmaceuticals is spending a lot of money on advertising and not having a good sense of how effective that is. Is it really making a difference in terms of product adoption? Hospitals, with all the changes in the healthcare laws and things of that nature, really looking at how do you run a hospital so that it's profitable? Retail operations are always looking at things like an arrangement, a group of products together, and how well those sell together when they're presented a certain way. So just getting into the idea of you want to have some kind of justification for adoption of any technology, and that is certainly true of ClickView. One thing I will add is this idea that's been around for a long time, which is kind of like this Ralph Kimball, if you're familiar with his ideas in data warehousing. He always said, well, you should deliver kind of chunks of value in iterative cycles, and I think that's been somewhat implemented over the years. Maybe not easy to do, much easier said than done. But I think with ClickView, we're finally to a point where, we can really, the technology is such that you really can deliver, kind of focused applications, a set of KPIs and dimensions or measures in a short period of time, and build on, your prior successes.
Yeah, so kind of what you were saying there is, data discovery is this great thing. You can go out there and surf and find all kinds of things you've never seen before, but, to bring any technology in-house, you have to have some kind of business case or justification to bring it in. So driving a little bit deeper on this point is what we found successful from our clients and also from, ClickTech selling software and stuff has been, pick a specific functional business problem and also one with a strong champion. What I found is usually a stronger champion is better than having a stronger business problem because they can drive things through. But the nice thing about ClickView is it allows for the quick modeling, rapid modeling of these business issues, so you can build out your business case using your real-world data discoveries that you find, document those metrics, build out your business case in ROI, and you'll see all over ClickView's website and all out there, and from our clients we've seen it too, is you will get a rapid return on investment in terms of weeks versus months with ClickView. That applies if you're looking for a brand new implementation of ClickView. It also applies if you already have ClickView in-house, go find an additional business champion and drive it towards different functional areas. So continuing on that theme is, data discovery and the green, white, and gray concept leads to numerous discoveries.
Yeah, and I think that, generally what you see is when you bring this thing in-house is that other people see, wow, look at what you can do in ClickView. Look at what this guy is doing. So I want that too, just leading to, kind of this organic growth of multiple applications. Everybody wants to have, their numbers, their reporting, their issues up on the big screen, if you will.
Yeah, and that's great. So this is getting down to what we're talking about, how this drives into multiple applications, and we'll drive into the architecture stuff we're going to talk about here in a second. But, ClickView delivers that rapid return on investment and solves business problems that previously haven't been able to solve. That's all good, but what happens sometimes within organizations is, sales may bring in ClickView to do some kind of forecasting accuracy application, pulling data in from Salesforce.com. Then they might look at customer penetration or territory management. Marketing catches wind of it, and they start doing some promotional effectiveness and lead management. Finance wants to do some cash flow analysis, financial reporting, operation, HR. All the functional areas within the organization jump on ClickView, and what sometimes happens is you start getting QVW or ClickView multiple applications all over the place, and sometimes you hit, this is kind of a over-exaggeration, you hit a brick wall, and that kind of inhibits your ability to fully maximize your investment in ClickView. So the big question I have for you, Rob, is how did that environment happen?
Well, so what typically happens, and I think this even in my I'm just going to say, brief career, it seems like you go through these cycles where some technology enables everybody to have, some kind of data warehouse on their desktop. And, so then everybody ends up with their version of the truth. And, you end up running around, the folks in an IT organization end up running around trying to put out fires. Another common thing I see is that, maybe they put up one app, hosted on a dashboard. It was great. It performed great. And, everybody loved it. So they added a bunch of different apps and a bunch of different users, and all of a sudden everything runs horribly, and everyone's surprised by it. And of course, you can get these data issues or these data security issues in big corporations where, that the design of things hasn't really been well thought out. So now everybody sees everybody else's data, causing all kinds of issues of contention and rivalry within an organization.
Yeah, so that kind of drives us to, number 2 on our list of 10 things I wish I would have known, and how that drives into supporting multiple applications is we've seen this again and again, is just because getting data into QlikView is easy doesn't mean you shouldn't have a data architecture, and that becomes even more prevalent as QlikView grows and you have more applications out there.
Yeah, and when we talk about this, we're talking about, you said that these are kind of age-old problems of data integration, which is, garbage in, garbage out. If your source data is dirty and it never gets cleaned up, well, it's dirty in your application, in your reporting application. Things like, if you have a geography hierarchy or a product hierarchy for an organization, for most organizations over a period of time, that's going to change slowly, but it's still going to change, and you need to account for that. I think these long-standing issues. The point here is, QlikView is great technology. I'm one of its biggest supporters, biggest proponents. But it doesn't solve, these kind of age-old, slowly changing dimensions, issues like that with data integration. So it's just important to remember that all those things that have been developed over a series of decades don't all of a sudden go out the window.
And that's kind of what I was alluding to when I introduced you in the introduction slide was, QlikView doesn't solve those issues. It's great. You can hire somebody, or you can go out and download QlikView and crank out a bunch of QBW applications. But you should probably go back and look, or in your initial project, get some kind of data architecture expertise in helping you design, even if it's your first application, making sure you're in sync with corporate standards, data standards, all these buzzwords down here, ETL, MDM, metadata, et cetera. Somebody who understands those and helps you as you deploy your application. So this is where we're going to start drilling down a little bit deeper now on issue number 2. And
yeah.
The first one we want to talk about from a data architecture perspective is a staged architecture. What is it? What does it mean? And how does it apply to QlikView?
Right. So this is one of the cool things or good things that QlikTech and the community of QlikView users has innovated. It's a very sensible approach, whereas you're kind of abstracting different functionality to different layers. So if you think that, all your source systems, which could be like Salesforce or Excel spreadsheets or SAP, could exist at one level. So that's kind of like your source level. And then on top of that, you just have a series of QVWs whose only function is to pull the data required from those source systems and generate, a series of QVDs. QVD files are kind of like the QlikView proprietary data file. And so here is really you get into, being able to reuse data, just having to produce the data that you need, and then abstracting out, you might have a business logic layer that just builds your data models for QlikView applications. Finally, you have a presentation layer, which is what the end users actually see.
Yeah, so a lot of end users or a lot of initial QlikView deployments and business justifications for QlikView are going out there and just building a couple of QVWs. But this is kind of the 10 things, big picture, begin with end in mind. it just believe me, it happens. ClickView just takes off within an organization. So even if you start off with a QBW like in the lower left, like you're showing there, eventually this is the type of architecture from a best practice perspective that will lend you to driving these multiple applications across the enterprise.
Right, and this is a much more scalable kind of, when you're working in this kind of framework, your implementation becomes a lot more manageable, a lot more scalable.
Great. So continuing on driving down in more depth, once again the feedback from the last webinar, people wanted more depth on these 10 things, was taking a look at another technology or feature that's been around in the data movement for a long time, but looking at incremental loads and how those apply to ClickView.
Yeah, so I mean, again, this is not a new idea. Anyone who's worked in data warehousing or ETL, in that ETL space, knows that, at certain times you're dealing with maybe a transactional system that's producing, just lots and lots of data, lots and lots of transactions, and it just doesn't make sense to be pulling in, an entire data set required for analysis every time this runs, and you might be running every, periodically every day or every few hours or whatever it is. So, you just really, for here, need to know that, ClickView, because it supports this QVD file format, makes it really easy to implement something like this, where you can just identify your new transactions coming out of the source system, put them in a QVD file, combine that with, the data that you loaded yesterday, or the complete data set that represents the historical data, and combine those two, and you get everything you need to load to your application.
So getting back into multiple applications again, you may have started off with a single QVW and doing full loads every time. But as you grow into that architecture that we showed, the stage architecture before on the previous slide, this is another way of helping you manage those multiple applications and deploy them across the enterprise. So changing gears now, we're going to move from data architecture now into enterprise architecture. And what we talked about before in our top 10 things was, ClickView has its own specific needs in terms of enterprise architecture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so John, I think that's just it. It's talking about, you want to, if you're going to embrace this technology, you want to use it in such a way that it works best, which may not be the way that, you've typically done things as an organization, as like an IT organization or a department as part of a larger organization. So the first thing I think is, you kind of want to look at, because this is an in-memory database, you want to look at how much memory you're providing. But I think just, we'll go into a little more detail on that. I think you really just want to have this idea of like, okay, this is ClickView. Let me see how ClickView works, and let me see what we can do on our end to accommodate that. That is the point we're driving home.
Yeah, and it's I hate to say it's nothing new. I mean, back in the day, I lived through the whole client server, release, and when that first came out, people were struggling with, how do I address, what's on a server, what's on a client, what tools are out there. Same thing, the web first came out, how do I deal with browsers, and what's the best way for application deployment? Do I build a Java app? Do I do JavaScript in the browser? And finally, the same analogy is kind of with the cloud. But, we've lived through all those technologies, and I think the best way that we've lived through those is learn from others as they've gone through it. And the same thing with ClickView. And we're going to, on the next couple of slides, share some of our expertise and experience and, driving down on, what is ClickView about. So the first one I want to talk about from ClickView perspective is how does it deal with memory? What's memory all about?
Well, yeah. So I mean, these days, when we talk about memory and adding, whatever it is, gigabytes of RAM, it's always one of the cheaper options for scaling out and for growing a deployment, growing an implementation. So this is really designed to show these diagrams. And we'll get into CPU processing, which is on the, let's see, the left there. But it's really designed to show that, as you add, capacity to your system, which can be measured as the number of users. Usually when you add applications to a deployment, multiple dashboards, you're also inevitably going to be adding users. So this is just a kind of a high-level diagram to illustrate that things scale in a linear fashion with QlikView in terms of processing power and memory specifically.
Yeah, and to drive down even a little bit deeper into this, we included this slide here. And once again, we are recording this, so you don't have to write all this stuff down. And we'll also probably be sending out copies of the presentation. But why don't you walk us through some of the formulas here on calculating memory requirements for QlikView?
Yeah, I don't know how useful it would be to get into real specific details here, but I think the point is that on that top row we see that how do you estimate the amount of memory that I need to include, say, on my server, and it really comes down to there's an initial amount of memory that's required to host an application, host a QVW file in this case on a server. And then as as users connect to that server and request access to that application, with each user there's going to be a consumption of memory. So we really want to find what is that initial kind of memory hit just to host the application, which is this RAM initial figure. We do that by looking at we look at the size of the data file on disk. We look at there's some constants involved, and we get a sense of what that what that initial memory hit is, and then we can go and get an idea of what is the consumption with each additional user. So once we have those kinds of figures, we can easily sort of extrapolate that out. So if we know we're going to have 30 users, we're going to need, so much memory, and it's so once you get used to sort of swimming in these numbers, it becomes a real simple matter to scale up to the degree required for your deployment.
And once again, if we're talking about managing multiple applications, this is kind of the formula for one application with multiple users. You just repeat this for your additional applications because QlikView does scale linearly when it comes to memory. So changing gears now from memory, let's talk a little bit about how QlikView works with processes.
Yeah, so I mean, of course, actually what I've run into is that people kind of get this idea of you need to, as the application or the deployment's growing and we're adding users, we can add memory and that should take care of everything. But you also have to consider processing power as well, because certainly whenever any kind of operation you're doing, with anything, but certainly with QlikView, if you need to render a chart or you need to make a selection, all those operations are going to require CPU cycles. And so we have a graph here, and this was some data that QlikTech provided to basically some testing that they did, which showed the kind of CPU cycle consumption as users were added to a system, and it's really just designed to show you that the processing power consumption increases in linear fashion. So as the number of users grow, the number of CPU cycles required is going to grow as well. So one of the best practices that I've found, and I've also seen encouraged in the community literature and websites, is really to have this idea of kind of benchmarking. If you have a limited number of users on a limited set of applications, you can get a sense of what that performance picture looks like. And so as you grow the thing out, again, you can pretty much start to see, by taking different benchmarks and sort of, creating a regression curve, if you will. I don't know if that's a little more detail than we wanted to go into. But just this idea that, this processing power needs to grow out in linear fashion as well.
So, tying it back into the theme of the webinar here, managing multiple applications, is we can benchmark one, grow that, benchmark another, grow that. The processing and both the memory should scale linearly.
Right.
Yeah. So continuing on with enterprise architecture, there's another feature within QlikView that really helps you out from managing multiple applications, and that's called the loop and reduce feature. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so really, the best way to illustrate this is through kind of this simple example that I put together. So for instance, if you have, data for a national organization, maybe it's their sales data, and that data can be broken up into 3 regions. Sales happen in either an east, west, or central region. You can, and there's 100 salespeople all over the country accessing this dashboard to get their numbers. They're all going to consume a certain size footprint, or they're going to create a certain size memory footprint when each of them accesses a dashboard. So what QlikView allows you to do via Publisher is to, it will actually reduce the size of the application so that each application just includes the data required for that region. And so what you end up with are 3 applications, but each of them are smaller. So when the 100 users log into their respective dashboards, the people in the West only go to the West dashboard, and so on and so forth. That footprint now, with each of them opening up the application, is 1/3 of what it would have been, had all the data been in one application. The added bonus here, and we're not talking about it too much in this presentation, is that now you also have built-in security, so that people on the East Coast aren't seeing what people on the West Coast are doing, and vice versa.
Yeah, pretty much you're just saying it's another technology, another feature via Publisher, QlikView Publisher, allows you to support your multiple applications. So once again, as you're beginning with the end in mind, you may just go and do a monolithic application with all the regions out there. But as you grow, or even if you want to do it up front, this is an approach to allowing you to scale and easily support those multiple applications. So our final deep dive on enterprise architecture is talking a little bit about clustering and load balancing.
Right. So this is another technology kind of innovated by the ClickDeck folks, and you hear a lot about clustering, you hear a lot about load balancing these days. It may not be what you've seen elsewhere if you're not familiar with how QlikView does it, but it's really designed to take best advantage. If you have a number of servers, you can link them together into a cluster, and there is an intelligence at the server level that as users make requests for certain dashboards, QlikView has kind of a decision engine which tells it, which server to host that dashboard on, and that's based on, bandwidth available. So this is another thing, really allows you to, helps manage scalability, and it's something if your deployment is growing, this is, there's only so much we can cover, in a presentation like this, but this is definitely something you want to look into sooner rather than later.
And the reason why we grouped it in this webinar was it's something that helps you manage multiple applications. And if you think about that from an architectural perspective up front, it will help you out down in the long run. So
sure.
Well, now that you know these 3, and you can go to our other webinar and learn a little bit about the other 7, the question is kind of what's next. It's kind of what we talked about earlier is you can go to our previous webinar, print out the list, and use these as a framework to say, okay, where am I at from a training perspective? Where am I at from a data architecture perspective? Am I good on each one of these? Identify the gaps, and like I mentioned before, Clearline Group does have a health check offering. We can come in and help you do this as well. But the key is you want to have some kind of plan of action to address these. Get things under control, get your arms around things, because the number of applications is going to take off. That is just a given. And then you want to put some results that you can make it repeatable and reusable process, or create a center of excellence for QlikView. So the final takeaways from what we're chatting about here today is it's a powerful tool, and it's an enterprise tool. Treated as such, things are going to start taking off, and just like what you've done with other enterprise applications, as they deploy out through your organization, make sure you have a data architecture, enterprise architecture to address them. Just like with everything else in life, leverage from other people, steal, borrow, beg from other people what they've done, and don't be afraid to ask for help. And as the final takeaway from a ClearLine perspective is we have the experience and expertise to help with your investment in QlikView, and the first step would be like a 10 things help check. So we'd like to think ClearLine Group is your clear choice for QlikView services. I want to thank everybody for attending the webinar here today. Our contact information, this is John Schmid, is jschmid@clearlinegroup.com, and Rob Wozniak at rwozniak@clearlinegroup.com. Feel free to email us with any questions or comments, and once again, I really appreciate you all spending your afternoon or morning with us on today's webinar. Thank you and have a great day.